my life really started in Stewart County after I was come out of Land Between the Lakes and graduated out of high school in 1965. My dad was a commercial fisherman. He fished nets, lines, and he also caught and sold fish. He also peddled them to Cadiz, Kentucky, by crossing the river and going down. He would catch fish, dress them, put them on ice, and carry them to people down around Cadiz and just across the river. From him and my mother dressed them. As they got them ready, they would peddle. I think it was once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks. They would deliver fish to places across the river where they'd have to cross in a boat to deliver those. And the rest of the time was here in this area, all the way over to Kentucky lakes where they delivered fish to. Then they got started making lines and nets, and they were made for themselves at first, but then they got to making them. My mother got to doing it full time for all the fishermen. And they all would have her knit the nets. Some of them were what they call barrel nets, any from a 1-inch mash to a 2-inch, 3-inch, and up to a 6-inch. And which I still have some of the nets that we fished or they fished, and some that I helped fish. So she would sometimes have to stay home and make the nets while he was peddling the fish. And he did that for, I guess, as long as I can remember, because he was still doing the same type of stuff. When I was hipping, of course, I was too small to do a whole lot, but if I stood on a 5-gallon bucket and used a chopping axe, I could cut their heads off. That's all I was able to do. My mother would pull the hide off, and my daddy, and I would cut the heads off, and my brother Rudy would split, gut them, and throw them into a tub to be washed. And that was our day, and we had what fish we'd caught, and I think we had about 8 or 10 fishermen from that up to about 15 at one time, buying all of their fish, dressing their fish, and peddling them out. And she started to market in Stewart County, I'm going to say in the early 50s, and people would come to our house where she made a place to where she could sell fish. And so me and my brother, we had to dress fish, and along with my mother, and then my grandmother, which was my daddy's mother, she took care of us when we were small, while Mama done the fishing dress. But like I said, once I got big enough, well, I had to cut the heads off until I got big enough to skin and do all of it. So we done it for a long time, and it was still going, I guess, part of the time after I come back from service. So before she really retired and quit selling fish. They built everything that we had. They had a sign that stuck up Nolan's Fish Market, and it stuck up at our house. That's where people came to get it. We had everything, the scales that we had to have. We had where we weighed them. Had a refrigerator and a deep freeze if they wanted to buy frozen fish, or if they wanted to buy whatever they wanted to buy. Well, we had it. But we'd start dressing fish sometimes. Earliest fishermen get in probably 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'd dress fish sometimes till 11 o'clock in the day to get all the fishermen, because we had to deal with them with the amount of ice we had. And ice was a very hard thing to get, because in the wintertime it wasn't any problem. We'd go to Kentucky Lake at what they call Joe Gray Holler. That's on Leatherwood. And we'd go down and get out on the ice and chop blocks of ice just big enough that we could get to move. We'd get in a boat, chop our way out, chop off big blocks, and then we'd float them in and drag them up on the ice and load them into the truck. We didn't have a cooler, so we had to build one. Built one out of a box, and it was around 16 foot long, probably 4 foot deep, somewhere around 5 foot wide. And that's where we stored the ice, to ice the fish down to make sure that they wouldn't ruin. We'd have to cut it in blocks, load it onto a truck, bring it up and fill that box plumb full of ice. And the blocks of ice would probably be maybe 4 to 6 inches thick. And we'd cut it just big enough to where we could handle it, get it stuck together, and lay it in a box, solid, from the top to the bottom and all the way down to it. The box was insulated, had 6-inch walls in it, and it was filled with sawdust. We get sawdust from a mill close by, because you didn't get insulation and stuff that you could get back then, so you had to insulate everything the best way you could. We just put a piece of sheet metal inside and nailed it to the wall against the boards. The boards were 6 inches apart, and we stuffed it full of sawdust all the way around. Fixed a drain in the bottom of it where we could drain it out, and when the ice had all melt, and then we had to either buy it or shovel them out in a hurry. If you filled it full and just closed the lid on it, it would last probably 3 weeks, and maybe even more, because that was a block that was solid, as big as the box was. But then as you started using it, opening and closing it, naturally it started deteriorating and melting. We'd move enough fish, and when the fish was really biting, then we'd have to double up on everything. I mean, we had to double up on the amount of fish you dressed, plus what you put away, and plus getting them delivered from one place to the other. We did that for a good long while. They would buy timber along the river banks and people who had timber, and they would cut them. And the only place that you had to get rid of them was in Paducah, Kentucky. And naturally, you didn't have no 18-wheeler to do the hauling. They had to take horses and pull them out on the high point. One of them is on Kentucky Lake, where they logged out. If you'll notice, certain times of the year, coming back from Paris towards Dover, there's a real shallow spot out there that goes dry. A lot of times in the winter, you can see where all the seagulls and stuff will stop on that island. That was right where they put all the logs just before the water started to come up. And that way they had the logs right where they were ready to be put together for the trip down the river. I don't know for sure where it was at on the Cumberland River, because the Cumberland River, it rose a lot faster, to my knowledge, than it did on the Kentucky Lake. It was just more water, and I guess not being able to see it, but the river not being as wide, you had to really be ready. It was a chore to try to get from Stewart County to Paducah, Kentucky, on a raft. And before they raft them, they nailed all of them together. One of the rigs that you drove the logs in, drove this end in the end log, and this one went around on top and drove it to the next one. And that held those together. And they're called the chain dog. Most all of them are a single hook on both ends. And that went in this log, and this one went into this log. Some of these chains were just a fraction longer, and it corners where a raft could tear apart. And if it did, you lost everything you had because there was no getting it back. If it ever broke and you wasn't able to stop it, then it broke your whole raft up because you were going from one spot to the other, hitting on the corners of the bank until it tore it all to pieces. So they had to make sure that these stayed in place.
How many of those did you use?
Oh gosh, I've got probably 200 still left that they used. These were got in Paducah. When you got to Paducah, they gave you either your chain dogs or more like that, which you had bought. So, I mean, they'd have to give you more to swap chain dogs.
So
or if you had to buy them.
When you got there,
right,
they would take the raft and give you how many ever chain dogs you used so that you could get the next load.
According on how far we were liking for getting unloaded, if they had a chance to pull our dogs out, then they would. And this is the rig that pulled them out with, and it's just called a chain dog puller. I know exactly how it works, but I mean, at that time, these long loops fit like this, and it went through your chain dog like that, and it would pull about any depth that you drove that in the log out in order to turn it loose.
So the rounded edge would rest on top of the log as you push it forward to pull the chain dog up.
Right, you'd have that, and this here helped hold itself up. This would hook down in it to make it where it wouldn't go any further. It's locked in. And as it's in the log, you push down on this end, and it would pull this out. And in order for that to pull it out, naturally it took quite a bit. They had extra pipe and stuff that they put over the end of it to give you the strength to get them pulled out. But if you had one soft, it's according on what kind of timber you was cutting, it's how deep you drove them and all of that. If you sold the logs, it's according on you buy every log you could get. And I guess that maybe explain it, and I would be guys that couldn't just get right on it, but a load of logs that you see today on a 18-wheeler, maybe 3 bunks, 4 bunks. Well, you count the number of logs that's on that, and I'm gonna say you would haul probably 4 18-wheelers, 3 to 4, according on how high the water is, how much current you had, and how long you had to get to Paducah, Kentucky. And of course, the main thing of that is like I said, you can't afford for your raft to tear up. I don't guess they had insurance as far as I know. If they did, they didn't tell me nothing about it, but in what you made, it better hold together. Before you ever left to go down the river, you had to have everything together. And I know the first one I started building, he let me know right quick, boy, you won't even get started. Your whole log, everything you got will be tore up. I said, how come? I said, man, this thing is good and square. I mean, but I got an 8-foot log, and then I got a 16-foot log. How am I going to get them together? They got to stick out there. Man, we got us a good flat spot in the middle. And he said, no, that's the worst way you can build it. All of your holes and gaps is in the middle where you live. Your raft is square. It has 4 corners. And the 4 corners are to hold it together, because you may have 16 15-foot logs or 16-foot logs, 14-foot logs that will be here. Then here comes up 8-foot logs. Well, hey, how do you get 8 foot in there with 16? And so they put those logs together because they haul from probably 20-foot logs to 8-foot logs, according to what they were making. Strawberry crates was one, apple crates, baskets, all of that was made from what they went down the river with. And these rafts had to be square on all 4 sides. And you had what you called a gouge oar at one end and a gouge oar at the other end. That was so that there was no front to this here raft. It was square, oblong, whatever, but it was made to go down the river and hit the bank on one side, the willow trees, and she'd spin. And you had to get with your gouge oars and keep her going so when it turned around, it was going sideways. And you still going down the river. And you didn't guide it. It guided itself. It went to the next bank it would. It might be this side, it might be the other side, or it might be a bend in the river. If it's in a bend in the river, you had to hit the bank with that side. And then it would turn the whole rig around. And then you'd be, the back end is heading down the river because it was square. And you had your holes in the center. But before you ever left the bank, you made sure that you had about, I'd say, enough to pile about the size of that fan, 4 foot by 4 foot. Pile dirt out. Take a wheelbarrow and roll wheelbarrow loads of dirt and pour it on the logs with them floating. And then pour another load on the fire. And then get up there and tamp it all down. That's what you cooked on all the way down the river. As you got something to cook, people would carry smoked meat, stuff like that didn't ruin. Wasn't no such thing that I know of as ice chests. So you had to eat what you cooked. When they go down, it never stopped until it got to its destination. And it bounced from one side to the other. And that's what I was saying. It had to make sure your raft stayed together. And in order for that to do that, all your short sides, if you had a 20-foot log or a 16-foot log, another 18-foot log, whatever length it was, I think it was 8, 12, 14, 16. I think they had some 20s. And once you put all those together, this one you might have 5 logs that's 20 foot long. And then you might have 5, 16. Well, you got a 4 foot opening in there, you know. So, hey, you just let it go. And then you'll get another 20 and you put it together. An 8, 2 8s or whatever. And all your holes was in the middle of the raft all over. But the square part was still there. You had to stay out of that and cook on the logs that was together. And people, of course, that was my question was, why would you ruin that many logs and cooking, but you had to eat? So well, you never did ruin them. That was putting the dirt on. You get it thick enough that you cook, do whatever you want to do, have a shanty to keep all the meat and stuff in. And then there was a man on the front and one on the back, and he guided it with the oar. As long as it was going straight, you could stand on the back and guide a whole 2 18-wheeler loads down the river like you see it go down the road. But it was just guiding it, holding it straight. You wanted to hit that bank at a spot. When it hit, you want one corner to hit, not nothing over here. And hopefully it would be wide enough, and they was all, you want to be wider than the river. Because if you did, you was in trouble. You'd have to cut your raft up. But anyway, that's before they started. They knew where the water was and how high it was and how swift. And the more rain, the faster your raft got to Paducah. Because you moved on. And people seen drift floating down the river today, seeing how fast it does go. And I can imagine, I've never rode one. And so my father had me build one, and I put it in I took it, and I set him down, and I went and cut logs from, big as a pool stick all the way, and I cut 8 foot, 12 foot, 16 foot, and I piled them all out on the table, and I said, okay, Daddy, build me a raft. So he built that raft, showed me, or he gave it to me, and I had a little chain. I was cutting it up in little pieces to make the chain bogs, and I put that thing together just like he would tell me to. Well, you got to do this and that one. This and here takes 2 dogs, to where that nowhere only took 4 dogs or 6 dogs to hold it together. If it's a long one, it took more of those chain dogs to keep it together. But every one of them on the outside edge had a chain. Every log had that in it. One in this log, one in this log. And they done that around the whole raft. And that's how they stayed together. No matter where they hit, when they were drove in there, them 2 logs stayed together. You hit that bank, the other end of them, it started coming around. But you didn't have everything 16 foot. You had them placed in different positions to where no matter where it hit, on which end it hit, it stayed square. And she'd spin. And when it spun, the person on the gouge oar would be back there, and he'd be fanning it. It was a big, long stick, probably 16 foot long, and had a big paddle, just like a sailboat paddle is. And you just started doing that right there with it to keep it straight. And as it was going down the river, just to keep the thing straight, because the further you could go before you hit a bank, better off you, the less work you had to do. And it would do that. And you ate there, slept there, the whole 9 yards until you got to Paducah. I can't remember how long, it's according on how much water you had, what the speed was, to how fast you'd get there. I know Daddy would be gone sometimes a week, or maybe a little over. When they got to where they were selling it, you say, well, how in the world did you get that many logs out of the water at a place to where they can saw it and put it up? And that was where they'd tie your raft off. They'd come out and get you, throw you a cable, pull your raft, the whole raft of logs in. And once they pulled that whole raft of logs in, as you notice, like I said, they were all chained together, just like that right there. Well, and they had what you call a splice pole, which was made out of a hickory, and it was around, about that big around, 6, 8 inches maybe through, and up to 20 foot long, or as long as they could get that hickory, straight hickory. That's how they held the whole thing together. They had nailed and as they went down the river, but that splice pole, they put that splice pole on there when they got down there. Say they needed, say one bunk that would fit on an 18-wheeler. They were ready to take that bunk off. They'd come in there with a saw, and they'd saw that in two. You pull a chain dog out of this end and that end, and just slide it right out of the raft, because it was all tied together. And that would be the 8 foot, 16 foot, all of them was tied together, but all the uneven ends were in the middle. They were straight on this side and jagged on this side. Same way on the other side. So it was 2 logs wide, be like 2 barges pushing stuff down the river. And as it went down the river, of course, when we got down there, they would ask for, they had a big chain and a, I don't know what you call it, but it just run on a conveyor belt all the time, just like the unloader does on a raft at Cumberland City or places like they unload the coal. It just keeps turning. And it's got spurs on it that comes up under a log. Well, they go out and they cut the raft that we carry down the river and cut it in 2. That would be 1 square. As many logs as they wanted to pull up at one time. All of them still chained together. And when you floated it in against that big chain, You just pick up the whole round, and you just wind it to the top. When you got up there, that's when you pulled all your chain dogs out, and your logs were free. I forgot to tell you though about measuring them, footage. You say, well, how did they sell them? They sold them by the foot, and they done it just like you do it today. Only in measuring a log for a raft was different. Of course, I guess fair or not fair, I guess they figured it probably the best way. The fella floating them down there is going to get as much as he can get for that log. And you measure that log by the little end. In other words, if you got the butt cut and it's 12 foot long, 16 foot long, 18 foot long, that's where you measure to get your footage. Well, it's kind of what they had and what was selling. My daddy could tell you what trees that was not really good, which would be sycamore, sweet gum, was mostly made into strawberry crates, and it was sliced in thin, one-time things. And then they was gone because it was a cheaper log. The good logs, they brought more. This day and time, I'd shoot anywhere 30 cents a foot, 80 cents a foot, just according on what it is. That's how they got it. I was asked by the audience over here, I was asked about how do you get back once you get to Paducah with those logs. I think it was once a week, I could be wrong, maybe twice a week, the mailboat runs. And when the mailboat runs, it's going to run, just like it's always been. So you got to make way. Naturally, it didn't get to run when you was at extreme high water. Well, that's when you want to put in. That's when you can get the raft to your destination in a hurry. You get your money and get ready to head back. Well, the way you got back was by the mailboat. And that's how you got back. And you said, well, how you carry your chain dogs? Well, I said, you didn't carry them. They were sent to you when you got another strip of timber and you needed so many chain dogs. And they would bring that by the boat, unload it to the people, and they had to use them from right then. They took them from there and brought them back. But you had to have your set, or you had to buy them every time. And so that's exactly how you got back from where you were going. He had me cut to build a little barge that I just used sticks as big as a broom handle down to a coloring pencil to show the distance and the length of the logs and how he laid them together to make a raft. And I might not be exact, but I'm pretty close. I can get one built something like that they built back then. And then if I wanted to really look, because he built the one that was at the Dover hotel up here, where all the artifacts are. It's her nets, his trapping, logging, and all of that. They donated a lot of pictures and stuff to them of how it was made. When my daddy was working at the locks, he couldn't fish. So he was having to work at the locks. But that didn't stop the other fishermen from coming in. We always looked at our fishermen as, well, I wish they'd hurry up and get in. Everybody come in one at a time. You got to go out and get the guts all over you, and you dress the fish, and you get them all done, you wash it up, head to the house, but here comes another truck in. You got to get right back out and start the same thing again. Why can't everybody come at the same time? Well, you had one like person by the name of Gordon Dunaway. He's dead, but he was the last person to come in every day. He never got there before 11 or 12 o'clock. And when he did, he never covered his fish up, and they were just as dry as they could be. You couldn't skin them. They were the hardest thing to skin that ever was. And I remember my mother saying, hey, one more time like that, Gordon, and I ain't going to buy you fish. Because when you try to pull the hide off of them, it pulls the meat. It's not ruined fish, it's just dried out. The hide will dry so that you can't skin it. And if you can't skin it, well, that's not good. Growing up, I lived off of everybody else's fish. I got fed out of fish that she got for nothing. And you say, well, what did they sell? Well, they did not use the head. And behind the eye on any catfish, there is a wafer of good meat. Just as good as like a T-bone steak. It's behind the eye and in under the gill and down. And it's about the size of a sausage patty if it's a fish 5 pounds. And so we cut every one of them off and fed the rest of it to the hogs and saved that to eat with. And a lot of people wanted what you call fillet fish or fish that didn't have bones in it. Well, my mother knew how to skin a fish to fillet a fish out. Well, I'll call it the pocket comb with a piece that comes down the backbone and you've got to leave meat on it. And I still love it today. I love to eat a pocket comb because it's a piece of meat that fries, real quick. It gets done and you can eat it and it's good. But you can't eat the big bones, you just pull it right off of them. But other people can't do that. And they throw their stuff away and we get what they throw away. And when you dress for 10 or 12 fishermen, ain't any trouble to get supper. But it's when you eat it 7 days a week, 4 weeks a month, it finally gets old. We didn't have to eat it, I don't guess that much. We dressed everything. We've dressed coon, we've dressed possums, we ate just about everything. I don't know of much that I ain't ate except the polecat. I guess I have ate just about, I've tried eating mussels that's in the river, but they're so tough. They're still good to chew on, but they are so tough you can't bite them. And I ain't been figured out how to make them tender, like you do a oyster shell or something that's got oysters in it. And when we tried it all, that's about all that I ever know them doing is either making logs, getting logs, dressing fish, peddling fish, building nets, and fishing. And that's pretty well a full time for them. And then, of course, naturally, as Barbara and David came along, things was different. You could buy a car, it didn't cost too awful much, and everything was so much better. But in the old days, it was pretty rough on people that had to work every day. And mine was started from when me and my brother had to clear new ground with a 49 model case tractor and a long cable. No, I guess maybe the first time I got lost coon hunting was a scary time because I found out that my father didn't know where he was at either. And neither did Dumas Melton, the man that was with him. Why it made me scared? I thought, well, hey, if they gonna die, I am too. We're gonna all die here together. We're gonna all be together. Because we were coon hunting, they got in an argument on which way to go. The dogs hit and they ran. They got a tree coon. We went to it. We got the coon out. And got ready to leave. Corder said, we go this way. Daddy said, no, you'll never get there going that way. You go this way. And me and Rudy sitting on a log. I was carrying the chopping axe we cut the tree down with. And one of us had the rifle and the other had the chopping axe. And I said, boy, we're going to have a long time getting to the house because it's a long way to no way. And one saying this way and one saying that way. And you wasn't allowed to say anything. So you just kept your mouth shut and sat there. So me and Rudy would sit there on this big log that we were looking at, and I had a chopping axe. I just kept chopping on her, and I'd chop a little hole out, and I said, boy, I wish they'd hurry up and get through arguing, and then I'd chop a little more, and Rudy'd chop a little bit. And we finally had that log chopped 3 or 4 different places. Well, they decided that who won. So I don't remember which one of them won, but they both decided to go the same way. So we walked for about an hour. And I said, man, how much further is it? Oh, it's just over this next ridge. That's all it is. Well, we crossed 2 or 3 ridges and it still wasn't there. And so they got in another argument. So, well, hey, I told you was wrong in the first place. No, it wasn't you was the one who's wrong. You need to. We just didn't say nothing. What we done is sat right back down again to start listening to the fight. Well, he sat there a few minutes, and I was smallest. Rudy was the biggest. And I looked over at him. I said, Rudy, they're arguing that one of them says we know where we're at, and the other said we're a lot closer. And I said, we ain't a bit closer. I said, look, there's a log we cut on an hour ago. There it is, where we saw them. Rudy looked down there and he said, well, it sure is. Here's where I cut over here. We've been here an hour ago. We've been walking an hour to get home. We ain't got here. We ain't gonna make it. He said, I'm gonna tell him. I said, well, I'm not. Hey, I got more sense than that. I ain't saying a word. And he goes, hey, I think y'all are lost. What are you talking about? Well, y'all said we was going to get here in an hour. We was going to be close to the truck. Well, we are. I said, we ain't a bit closer. He said, what do you mean we ain't no closer? He said, because right here's where we cut an hour ago. We still sitting on the log. And come back and sit down on the same log again. And y'all sitting there arguing. I don't think y'all know where you're going home. I said, boy, you go get your end whooped. But he didn't. They looked at the log, and then both of them got in an argument. And I don't know what happened, but we started walking again. We come out on Kentucky Lake. That was a long way, but put out on the Cumberland Riverside and come out on Kentucky Lake. And he said, I know what's his name that lived down the road. When they finally come out, they come out at a fellow's house that they had coon hunted before. And they went in there and woke him up. He said, yeah, I'll take you and the dogs home. So he got in the old car and got in the truck and put us in the back of the truck and drove from somewhere down around Birds Creek Holler all the way back across to the Cumberland Riverside. And that's how we got back. But now that's how you live. You didn't cross your parents, that's for sure. I couldn't get a date with a girl because I smelled like a fish. I didn't really want one, but I still smelled like a fish. You know, I guess I'd have to say I'm about the smartest. My brother done the dumbest thing. He said, you lost. I said, I'm not no fool. I ain't saying nothing. So, you know, it would have been nice if I could have been the winner on that, but I wasn't. So I guess the dumbest thing I ever was to sit there and never spoke and said, hey, y'all are lost. I got proof. But I still thought I knew what a whooping was, so I didn't want one of them. So, if you ain't saying nothing, more than that, you ain't going to get beat on. So I guess that's what I would say was the worst. And I stayed like that, I guess, till I graduated out of high school. Not with the highest honors either, but I did graduate. I'm not ashamed of it. It took me 4 years to get out. And I started a freshman year, and then I'd go all the freshman year, and I'd fail. Fail just enough that I'd have to go to summer school all the time, all through summer, in order to get to the next grade. Freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. When I walked across the stage, I didn't even still have my diploma. I had to go to summer school before I got it. And so that was my education. I ain't got a lot of education, but I ain't never been sorry for not going to college. I've enjoyed doing what I'm doing.